it's gonna be that particular episode. Hey everybody, you're tuned into another episode of ProGuidanceXIII, where 13 is stylized in Roman numerals. I'm your voice of choice, hidden in plain sight, and I'm so happy for you guys to be rocking with me again. So I didn't anticipate for this particular episode to be so early in this show's lifespan, but what the hell. It's here now, so we're gonna just do it one time and get it over with. So, a friend of mine... Okay, seems to be safe. Anyway, so a friend of mine really got... No, you know what? Forget it. I'm done. I'm through with this. Now listen up. We need to come to a mutual agreement, folks. I need you guys to understand, truly and honestly and genuinely, that I do get suggestions for these shows from particular friends, actual friends that I have, okay? So if I hear anything like that out of you guys again, I swear, I promise you that I will end all of you, each and every one of you, okay? Capiche? Kaput? Good. Now let's get on with the show. A friend of mine, yes, with authority, a friend of mine suggested that I talk about The Legend of Zelda. So I said, why the hell not? I love The Legend of Zelda. It's one of my favorite franchises. So I'm gonna have fun just talking about my extraordinary love for this franchise. So, for those who are not familiar with The Legend of Zelda, The Legend of Zelda is based on a princess named Zelda. No, not that guy. Zelda. No. Zelda is the princess, everybody. Zelda, yeah, there we go. Zelda is the princess. That's a very common misconception with this franchise, and I'm gonna clear this up from the bat. Zelda is the princess. The protagonist of The Legend of Zelda video games is Link, the Hylian. Yeah, go figure. Why would they name the franchise after the person that you're not playing as in majority of the video games? Who knows? Who cares? It's still a good franchise. But anyway, The Legend of Zelda is based on Princess Zelda. The story of Princess Zelda being captured over and over again by an evil Gerudo, or an evil wizard if some people aren't familiar with the lore and the mythical creatures and characters in the Legend of Zelda series. But yeah, a Gerudo named Ganondorf, who is hell-bent on taking over the world of Hyrule, just keeps capturing Zelda in hopes that he can overtake the Triforce of Wisdom in order to complete his ultimate goal of collecting all 3 pieces of the Triforce in order to make a wish so that he can wish to take over the world of Hyrule and turn it into his own personal dark world. Now, I can get into detail about what the Triforce is and why he wants to make this wish later down in the episode, but the basics. So first things first, let me introduce those who aren't familiar with the series of The Legend of Zelda. Let me give you guys a little brief taste, a little brief touch, or a little brief history of what this series is all about. So, The Legend of Zelda was first released in 1986. with a video game under the name of the same title, The Legend of Zelda. The release of this game came after the infamous video game crash in the 1980s. And if you're unfamiliar with the video game crash that happened in the 1980s, well, due to an oversaturation of video game licensing and video games being produced on the whole, the video game industry got stale. Some video game producers tried to cash in a little bit too much on the popularity of this increasing hobby that people had, and they really made a lot of low quality games at one particular point in time in the 1980s, and people just weren't having it. People were a little bit smarter than the average bear to just keep on buying these ridiculous and rushed video games, and video games went on a major decline in the 1980s, and the industry as we knew it would have almost been dead if it wasn't for a particular video gaming company named Nintendo, who produced and worked hard at producing video games in the late 80s to basically single-handedly save the whole video game franchise. So if you guys didn't know, the whole video gaming industry as we know it today is all thanks to Nintendo for resuscitating the industry back in the 80s and making all of our dreams come true. I am who I am as a person today because of Nintendo, so I would like to thank Nintendo for that. But yes, The Legend of Zelda was first released in 1986 after the crash. Nintendo also had other IPs such as Metroid and obviously Super Mario Brothers that also helped Legend of Zelda to build their library of video games and IPs, and to generally help Nintendo build themselves as a brand on the whole to become a household name. So The Legend of Zelda was created by Shigeru Miyamoto, and the exclusive producer for the Legend of Zelda franchise is Eiji Aonuma. And the music composer of the Legend of Zelda series is Koji Kondo. Koji Kondo is particularly famous for all of his musical renditions in other popular Nintendo franchises such as Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario World. He is a master at creating masterpieces for all of these amazing sounds that you'll be hearing in these video games, all Nintendo-based video games. If you know the World 1-1 jingle from Super Mario Brothers, you know Koji Kondo. If you've listened to Drake's song Hotline Bling, then you know Koji Kondo. If you've listened to that song I Like to Cha-Cha, I can't remember who's the artist's name at the moment, doesn't matter. His name should be Koji Kondo because Koji Kondo was the masterpiece behind all of those tunes. Now you know. But yes, so like I said, the creator of the Legend of Zelda series was Shigeru Miyamoto, and he based this franchise on high fantasy adventures and the adventures that he used to have as a little child growing up back in his hometown in Japan. And I, for one, I think that's a very interesting thing to base your game around, to take personal experiences and to develop them into your ideas and present them to the world. I think that's a pretty solid thing to do, and I actually respect Miyamoto for doing that. So if you didn't know, The Legend of Zelda is an adventure role-playing game that encompasses the player to go through a lot of dungeons, solve a lot of puzzles, collect a lot of items. It's basically an open world adventure where the player roams around defeating bad guys, collecting treasures in order to advance in his quest. So I can also see where that would tie in to the creator's adventures as little children and why it made such an interesting concept for this video game. Now the question may be asked, just where did they get the name Zelda? Well, Zelda does sound like a very regal, a very royal name. And for those who did not know, this is a very interesting piece of information. Zelda's name came from the famous author F. Scott Fitzgerald. He had a wife named Zelda Fitzgerald, and Miyamoto himself liked the name, so he went to F. Scott Fitzgerald and he asked Fitzgerald if he could just name this princess for his video game franchise after her. And Fitzgerald agreed, and that's how the name stuck. And now we have The Legend of Zelda. Also, if you didn't know, famous actor, the late Robin Williams, was actually a fan of The Legend of Zelda franchise, and he named his daughter Zelda. Now, unfortunately, Zelda Williams, because I don't think she's married, but Zelda, she wasn't too much of a fan of her name at the beginning. But after a while, I guess it stuck with her, and I mean, hey, who wouldn't want to be named after a famous video game heroine? and a princess at that. So she kind of warmed up to it after a while, and I'm glad she did. I mean, to tell the truth, guys, I plan on giving my daughter, when I have a daughter, the name Zelda. It's gonna be one of her names. So future wife, if you out there, listen up. Our daughter, one of her names is going to be Zelda. You have no say in that, okay? Anyway, so back to the naming of the franchise as a whole. I know you guys are wondering, well, exactly why would the creators of Nintendo name a whole franchise after a player that you don't play as? Because as I stated earlier, you play as the main protagonist in the series, Link, who is actually the holder of the Triforce of Courage. It is Link's duty to go out and save Princess Zelda in the majority of the Legend of Zelda video games. And it's so unfortunate that there's only like a handful of games with the name Link in them. So exactly why is it called The Legend of Zelda? Because that's exactly what it is actually. It's a Legend of Zelda. Zelda is literally the legend. It's the tale of Zelda. You're just merely playing a hero to go and save this princess. And the main premise behind each and every game is what the creators wanted to do is they wanted the player themselves, the actual human player, to name the hero after themselves so they could feel like they are actually a part of this adventure. Instead of just having a generic named protagonist take on the role of taking on this adventure, you get to name the character yourself in majority of the Legend of Zelda games. So yeah, it's Link as a character who is saving Princess Zelda and based on what the storyline says, but at the same time it's you doing all the work too, which is why you get to name the character after yourself. Here's a little bit of information. The Legend of Zelda is actually my third favorite video game, only being surpassed by, well, in second place obviously is Super Mario Brothers. And drumroll please, my favorite video game franchise is Bubsy. That joke never gets old, right? Alright then. So my favorite video game franchise actually is, drumroll please, Sonic the Hedgehog. Come on now, have you been living under a rock for the last like decade or so? We've already went over this last episode. I told you guys, if you guys weren't listening, my favorite franchise is Sonic the Hedgehog. Come on, you gotta step up the pace. You gotta stay with the program, alright? I've been said that. But yeah, Zelda is my third favorite franchise, and pretty much Super Mario Brothers only beats out Zelda in my books, is because Super Mario Brothers is one of the first video games I played, so I have to give it homage. I have to give it that respect. But if anybody knows me, besides being a Sonic fan, a Mario fan, look at all this Legend of Zelda paraphernalia I have right here. I am a huge Legend of Zelda fan. It was one of the first video games I played, and I instantly grew an attraction to it from the first one I played, hands down. It just was so captivating, amazing, enticing. It forced me to think outside of the box. Even though I was just a small child, I kind of enjoyed sitting down and taking on the adventure, taking on the task, taking on the risk of going out there and actually solving these puzzles and figuring out how to basically advance the story. It really formed and helped mold me into the avid thinker that I am today, and it actually helped me to be a very more vivid and accurate video game player, and it helped me actually to pay a little bit more attention to detail in our everyday lives. I could actually thank this game for that. But enough about me. This video game has a very huge legacy in the video gaming community. Some consider it actually the best video game franchise out there, if not one of the best. And two of its games are considered to be the best video games ever made. These two video games can be interchangeable. Some people's opinion might be one and other people's opinion might be the other. But for the mere fact that this franchise actually has two video games to be considered as the best video games ever speaks volume about how great this franchise is. So, speaking of favorites or best ever, I would like to give you guys a rundown of my favorite 5 video games in the Legend of Zelda franchise. So, starting with number 5, we have The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Oh, I know people, I know. It's like, how could you put Majora's Mask at number 5? Shouldn't that be a little closer to number 1? I know that's what some of you people are thinking, you know, more likely The Legend of Zelda fans, but I'll explain to you why. Now, I understand how deep and how intriguing The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask storyline is, And I, for one, let me tell you guys something. I haven't played The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask fully, unfortunately. Yes, don't have a heart attack, everybody. I haven't played the full game. I would say that's one of the main reasons why I have it so high up on the list instead of being closer to number 1. But for the most part, with what Majora's Mask is and what it stands for, I actually could appreciate it. For those who don't know, the story of Majora's Mask is that our protagonist Link, he stumbles upon this new world. He's originally from the world of Hyrule, but he stumbles upon this new world called Termina. And unfortunately, in Termina, they have this nightmare-fueled moon that is on a crash collision to their town. And it is up to Link to stop the moon from crashing into the town of Termina. And he must do this all within 3 days. Now, the mechanic in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is that you can rewind time. You can rewind time as much as you need to in order to solve the puzzles in enough time to not let the moon crash into Termina. That's the main thing about it. But if the 3 days actually do run out, you are treated to a cutscene of Termina being destroyed by this nightmare-faced fueled moon. Just look at this guy. You don't want to wake up from a nightmare from this dude, because more than likely you'll be bedwetting. Anyway, but yeah, that's my 5th favorite Legend of Zelda video game. My 4th favorite Legend of Zelda video game of all time is The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. Oh my god, everybody keep your pants off. Keep your... No. Yeah, I know it. Some people are gonna say I deserve that or whatever. But hear me out. Once again, unfortunately, I haven't completed The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Oh gosh, here it comes again. I'll wait. But yes, I haven't completed The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But the Ocarina of Time, in my opinion, is a very good video game. And as I mentioned earlier, people in the video game industry considered one of 2 Legend of Zelda video games to be the best game ever, and this is one. It has about the same amount of likers as the next game for best video game ever, so I can't tell you which one actually edges out the other, but the story of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is based on our protagonist Link once again, Ganondorf. He has kidnapped Princess Zelda and it's up to Link to save her. Pretty generic plot, pretty generic storyline, but the mechanic in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is that you start off with Link being a child, and after he collects the first 3 crests or pendants or whatever it may have you, he collects them and he is able to retrieve the Master Sword, which sends him in time 7 years ahead. So by this time, Ganondorf has totally taken over Hyrule, and now it's up to Link to save Hyrule and the Princess Zelda. So you must use your time traveling effects to travel back and forth through time to undo Ganon's evil bidding. 3rd on my list for favorite Legend of Zelda video game is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Now, the story of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is based on our protagonist Link once again having to save the land of Hyrule, more so this time, because the land of Hyrule has been taken over by another land called the Twilight, which is a pretty dark and desolate land. And the evil ruler king of the Twilight, Zant, he has made a pact with none other than Ganondorf in order to rule both worlds. And now Link must once again take up his sword and try to save both lands. Fortunately for him, he has help and he's accompanied by the princess herself of the Twilight Realm, Princess Midna. Now unfortunately, in the Twilight Realm, Link cannot sustain a human form for most of the game, and he is transformed into a wolf, so that's the gimmick of this video game. Mind you, while this game had a very slow start, the pace picked up a little bit in the middle and made the adventure interesting. And even though I think later down the line in this video game, they kind of got lazy with the dungeon design, I still could appreciate it for what it was. So now, here's the big hitters. My second favorite Legend of Zelda video game is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds is the sequel of a very popular Legend of Zelda video game that I'll soon enough get to talking about. But the story of The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds is that Hyrule, just like in Twilight Princess, has been kind of infiltrated by another world called Lorule. You see what they did there? So Hyrule has been kind of infiltrated by Lorule and the evil villain in Lorule. Once again, the evil villain makes a pact with Ganondorf in order to take over or conquer both worlds. And it's up to our boy Link once again to save both worlds, to save Hyrule and to ultimately save Lorule, because he's saving Hyrule. Now, the princess from Lorule, Princess Hilda, actually is your aide in this video game. She actually helps Link to navigate between both worlds. And this is why the name is so clever. A link between two worlds. The link between two worlds are these fissure portals that Link can walk through, because the main mechanic in this video game is, early on in the game, Link is transformed into a painting by the villain, Yuga. He's transformed into a painting, but he's given the ability to actually animate himself as a painting on walls. So he can walk across walls and he can go through cracks in the wall. And that's how Link uses this ability to help go between both worlds and save all two worlds eventually. So yeah, Princess Hilda is pretty much your tour guide for the whole video game, and she helps you to adjust and familiarize yourself with her land, Lorule. Now, Lorule is a more menacing, remiss, and just more fierce version of Hyrule, so beware when you're navigating around Lorule. And now, my absolute favorite video game in the Legend of Zelda franchise, drum roll please. It is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Now, where I mentioned that the Ocarina of Time was the first well, not the first, but where I mentioned that The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was one of the video games that is acclaimed to be the best video game ever, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is the next video game acclaimed to be the best video game ever. And I like this game for a numerous amount of reasons. First things first, obviously nostalgia. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was my very first Legend of Zelda game that I played. So why wouldn't it be my favorite Legend of Zelda game? Am I not right? I remember playing this game as a kid, trying to solve all the puzzles, looking up strategy guides. Well, not necessarily strategy guides, but there was a little pamphlet inside the box that it came with to give you hints and secrets on how to beat the first part of the game. And I remember looking in that. I remember actually playing the game while my dad was watching, and he would help me crack some codes and help me beat some dungeons and help me solve some of the secrets involved in it. So besides it being nostalgic for me, it was a good bonding time between me and my father. We do have a good relationship now. We had a good relationship all of our lives, but it's those actual quirky times that I like in my life that I could appreciate, you know? Another reason why The Legend of Zelda is one of my favorite Zelda games is because it is the only Legend of Zelda game for one of my favorite video game consoles, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Whereas almost every other Nintendo platform has at least a total of 2 Legend of Zelda games on it. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was the sole video game for that console, and it did stand its ground. It took The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past to be what it was, only for them to step up their game as much as they did to make the Ocarina of Time the direct sequel to the video game that people considered the best game ever. The Ocarina of Time only could be considered the best game ever because A Link to the Past is what it was. And besides, another thing is, in A Link to the Past, there were a lot of firsts for this whole video game franchise. It introduced a lot of concepts that weren't introduced into the series as yet. and I like it because it just pretty much developed the franchise. This was actually the thing that put the franchise pretty much on the map, because after the first video game, the introduction of the first video game, you know, it was still a new, fresh idea. People were still trying to catch on, and we didn't know yet. And after the second one, when Nintendo changed the formula just a bit, it kind of got a critical backlash, and it got panned a bit because of the formula being changed. So this is where the third one came in, A Link to the Past, and they went back to the original formula, and they just pretty much improved on everything by 100%. The mechanics were better, the adventure field was a whole lot more vast than the original one, and it just had a lot of creative effort into it that allowed players to have a blast. Those are some of the reasons why A Link to the Past is my favorite Legend of Zelda game. Now, as much as I want to, there's a whole lot more things I could talk about when it comes to Zelda video games, and truly, I feel like I want to do a part 2 to this episode. I won't do it right now, but eventually I'll come back around to doing a second part to this episode, because I just can't give this game justice in one sitting. This franchise, it's such a popular franchise that a popular YouTuber by the name of Peanut Butter Gamer actually created a whole month dedicated to the Legend of Zelda, and a lot of fans around the world normally just intake and create content based on the Legend of Zelda, and I'm gonna be one of those people too. So eventually I'll come back to the Legend of Zelda franchise to talk a little bit more about the games, but I know that this isn't the end at the moment. But moving right along, now I want to talk about my top favorite 5 incarnations of Princess Zelda herself, because believe it or not, I know this seems very weird, I'm a big fan of Zelda. I think she's a very beautiful woman, and yeah, she's fictional and whatever, but I really do appreciate her design, and I appreciate the incarnations that Nintendo has built upon her through the years. Some of these incarnations are the average damsel in distress who needs to be saved, and some are a video game vixen who's tough, able to handle herself. You know, she's able to hang with the boys. She's able to take care of herself, and sometimes, in some cases, even save the boys. You know what? I kind of forgot something. I kind of lied when I said my favorite video game in the Legend of Zelda franchise was A Link to the Past. My true, legit favorite video game in the Legend of Zelda franchise is, drumroll please, The Legend of Zelda 1 of Camelot. Oh man, that one just as funny as the Bubsy one. But anyway, no, I just playing with that. I'm gonna have to explain that later to you guys. But anyway, moving right along. So yeah, my top 5 incarnations of Zelda. So the 5th one is the Skyward Sword incarnation of Zelda. This incarnation of Zelda is pretty bubbly. She's pretty carefree, you know, she goes with the flow. And at this time, based on the Legend of Zelda timeline, see, that's something else I have to get into, but I won't get into it in this episode because I know this episode is very long as is, and there's just not enough time for me to fangasm over this franchise because it's such a great franchise. But anywho, somewhere down the line, yeah, she's pretty laid back. Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword Zelda here now, she's very laid back, and according to the timeline, she wasn't even a princess as yet when you really think about it. Well, according to the timeline, she wasn't even a princess yet in this game. She was just regular old Zelda, and she was just good friends with Link, really. She eventually did become a princess, and she eventually became the human form of the goddess Hylia. For the most part, she was just a regular old girl who became destined to be the Princess of Hyrule. And the main thing is, with these incarnations of Zelda, I like them so much more so based on their design. So the design of the Skyward Sword Zelda, you can see her bubbly, joyful bliss, you know? I like the thick lips, I like the wardrobe, and I like the direction they generally took Zelda in. She was basically a personification of what this game stood for. So my 4th favorite incarnation of Zelda is the incarnation from the Breath of the Wild video game. Mind you now, the Breath of the Wild is the latest Legend of Zelda video game, and the thing is, with the Breath of the Wild, it's the first game to actually feature voiceovers constant voiceovers, constant dialogue within the Legend of Zelda franchise. All of the other games prior to this had minimum to no dialogue, and this is the first one that features dialogue. And it's so unfortunate for me that I just do not appreciate Zelda's voice in this video game, but that's not the point. I think that her design is flawless. I really like the design, and even though I haven't played this game yet, I intend to play it later down the line. I know straight off the bat I'll be able to appreciate Zelda. I can see that she's pretty much a video game heroine in this one. She kind of can take up the mantle herself and kind of do things, probably not needing Link. I don't think she's a playable character in the video game, but you can see that she's going to be a good help, and she's very much involved in the storyline, and that's what I like. You know, she looks very innocent in this game, and I think, well, to my knowledge, they haven't established where this video game lies in the timeline, but from my speculation, I think it's established actually before the Skyward Sword video game, and the Skyward Sword is the first video game in the timeline, so I think this game will be even older than the Skyward Sword entry into the series. My third favorite incarnation of Zelda is the incarnation from A Link to the Past, because why not, right? This incarnation of Zelda, she's a little bit more mature than the rest. She's a little bit older. She's the damsel in distress in this one, unfortunately, but in general, I kind of just like the simplistic look they gave Zelda in this one. I kind of like the medieval times look in this one. I mean, the whole franchise is based on ye old culture, but at the same time, this one gives it a little bit more of a castle-y feel, and more, like I said, medieval vibe, you know? This really makes it feel like the days of old, back then, if you look at just all of the character art and the concept art and design for this video game. It feels like it was ripped out of Peter Pan or Robin Hood itself. And another point, back when I said this video game franchise was established on the creator's childhood, one other thing they took inspiration from was actually Peter Pan himself. So if you look at Link's design, it's quite obvious to see that Link is based off of Peter Pan, his visual design at least. Now you know. So my second favorite incarnation of Zelda is the incarnation from Hyrule Warriors. Just look at that. Look at her. She's very gorgeous. She's a warrior in this video game. She's playable. I like the blonde hair. The blonde hair, I think, is one of the best moves they ever could have done to Zelda. While she's very nice as a brunette, I think the very long blonde locks, the flowing Goldilocks hair, suits her quite well with the contrast of her very, very fair skin. I think this is a marvelous character design, and her gameplay isn't bad at all in this video game also. So yeah, that's why this is my second favorite incarnation of Zelda. And my ultimate favorite incarnation of Zelda is, believe it or not, the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess incarnation. Yes, I really like her because she has a kind of dark, well, let me not say dark, but she has an edgy feel to her, but she is still very, very graceful with her edginess. She understands that the town of Hyrule rests on her shoulders, and she takes on that responsibility, and she actually admits that she had failed Hyrule in this video game, unfortunately. Her duties as a princess came out to shine in this video game so deeply, and this is why I really love this incarnation of Zelda. Mind you, the character design is flawless. I think it's the best of all of the designs. It really fits her warrior personality, but it still gives her a regal and royal look at the same time, and that's why I could appreciate it so much. Anyway, I know that this episode kind of went on way longer than it should have, just like the next episode. Like, when I get into these video game episodes, please anticipate that these episodes are going to be quite lengthy, because video games is something that I enjoy, something I love talking about, and soon enough I'll probably just release a podcast explaining exactly why I love video games so much. But I'd like to thank you guys for just sitting here and just listening to me just ramble on about one of my favorite video game franchises, and I'd like to thank my friend who suggested the topic to me. And be cool, people. I think for a good long while I won't do any video game topics, because I don't want to bore you guys out with just video game topics of bombardment, but that's the suggestions I've been getting, and I don't have a problem with it. But I know that I have to keep it a little bit more diverse and mix it up a little bit, so don't worry, I'll have various topics coming soon and shortly, alright? But I would once again like to thank each and every one of you for supporting and giving me the feedback that you gave me. Sooner or later I'll get to a point where I'll be giving out personal shout outs to those who support me from week to week and they give me their feedback and who pretty much always listens to my show, and people who are always there waiting and asking me, hey Peach, you finished with this episode yet? When is this next one coming out or whatever? So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you all. I thank you for listening once again, and like always, I hope that you guys were informed by what I've said today, and I hope that you guys were entertained. I hope you were able to take something from this episode, learn a little bit more about the franchise, and if you feel like you can go ahead and just do some research yourself about the franchise if you really like it. Pick up a game or two and play it and see how you like it. But anyway, I've gone on a little too long now, so I'd like to say that this has been Pro Guidance 13, and I'm hidden in plain sight. Have a wonderful rest of your day.